Hey, everybody, welcome back to the show. As always, it's your host, Stuart Cranes. I am here with another amazing guest for us this week. But before I introduce him, please, as always, be sure to hit like, subscribe. The cost of admission, y'all, is always free. So please share this out with at least one person, especially if you gain any value from this week's conversation. And I know you will. And without further ado, I want to dive right in and introduce this week's guest. He is somebody that I had the privilege of working with way back in the day at New York City's YMCA. And he is somebody that has been blossoming in his own right, moving across the country, starting a new career. And I'm super excited to have him on because he's getting ready to give a TED talk that is entitled How to Live Life with Your Last Words. And really, all it's a topic that I think many of us don't think about because we often find ourselves taking the gift of life for granted. And without further ado, we're going to dive right in. Want to welcome my man, Robin Nathaniel, to the show. Robin, thank you for being here today.
My pleasure, Sue. I'm super excited about being here and just providing some value to your audience and just talking a little bit about the TED Talk, but anything else that you want to go over. I'm just super pumped to be here.
Yeah, man. Well, it's a blessing to be face to face with you again. I know it's been a minute, but in the interest of the listeners, I just want to dive right in. Let's just talk about the concept of last word. That's kind of like a heavy topic, even just off the bat for a lot of people, thinking about the end of our time, maybe the end of time for loved ones. What was the inspiration for developing a talk like this?
Yep, that's a great question. So I'll start by saying that I've always wanted to be a TEDx speaker, a TED speaker or a TEDx speaker, right? So the event that I'm going to be a part of is a TEDx event, a locally organized TED Talk. And honestly, I always wanted to get on the stage because I wanted to share my message. I didn't really know what my message was to start, but as I grew my business, I started thinking that it would somehow be aligned with my business. I saw a lot of people who have different, products and services and niches get on stage and somehow weave it in together.
Mm.
So, in all honesty, me coming with that mindset is I believe that's one of the reasons that delayed me from ever getting on the stage for so long. So finally, when I got the opportunity to get on the stage and I presented my ideas to the organizer, he almost like was like, nah, like none of that. That's not it. He's like, the talk is your story. And my story is really rooted in laws and unspoken words. And it's a really touchy topic that, in all honesty, I've never publicly shared the details. I've
Sure.
told close friends, family members, but the concept and the idea of me getting on a stage and sharing an idea on how we can be more intentional about how we end conversations, especially with the people we love, is something that came organically from the guidance of the organizers. But also, I believe the universe, God, whatever you believe in, my message and myself, we're just serving as a vessel to make sure
Mhm.
that people are who are in a position to receive the message can hopefully take action to avoid some of the pitfalls that I had to endure due to leaving words on the table.
Yeah. Oh man, there are so many things I want to ask you in response to that, Robin. You're talking about your story of loss. It's obviously going to be very personal to you, but it also seems to be the thing that got you this opportunity to share on a stage with a TEDx talk. What do you feel like is the connection between our personal stories and also our personal power?
I think most superheroes have like their origin story, right? And
Mhm.
moving through this world, especially as crazy as the world is, right? We have so much happening. There's so much pain, there's so much darkness and death, but there's so much light, There's an abundance of light that lives on the planet but also inside of us, right? And I think for the superhero, which is you, whoever is watching, listening, even used to, like, we're the only people who look out of these eyes, right? So you are operating in a space where, you are impacting the world around you. So I think the experiences that we, you know, undergo throughout our childhood into our adulthood, and then eventually as we move on to the next phase of life, it's really just about almost building a tool belt of, different resources that you can use for the next situation. Like, we don't want to live in the past, obviously, right? But
Mhm.
my past is a big part of, my journey, and I never want to discount it or forget it, even the parts that I'd like to forget. So I think for people who are striving for excellence, people who are pushing for greatness, that those vulnerable moments from your past can easily be changed into some kind of a positive fuel for you to move forward to the next steps in your journey.
Yeah. Yeah, amen to that, and we recently had a guest on named RJ DeRossi. He wrote a book on forgiveness. It's wonderful. I've started it. Highly recommend it to anybody listening, and definitely go back and listen to that episode once you're done with this one. But he talks about the hero's journey being one of choosing to stand in our personal power, in our leadership, and you actually hit on it, choosing an empowering interpretation, not letting these awful moments, these hurts, these wounds hold us down and hold us back from being who our creator meant for us to be on this earth. What has worked for you in your own journey in switching that narrative into one that's empowering and that allows you to push yourself forward to what you want to create with your life?
Hmm. I'm a work in progress. I'll start by saying that, it's not something that I have all the way figured out. And I think that
Mhm.
that's one thing that people really receive well, is that I'm in the mess too sometimes, right? I have good
Yeah.
days, I have bad days, but I think ultimately the thing that really helped me to get to a place where I've taken ownership of any shortcoming, bad experience, wrong done against me, trauma that maybe I have suppressed to kind of make it through. You work with me for a little bit, Stu, and I'm sure you would say, like, Robin's like happy and fun, right?
Yep.
But this is the same guy, like, every day that I rehearse my speech, I'm like crying.
Mm.
Like, I'm in tears every morning
Wow.
because of these experiences that I'm bringing out of myself to share.
Mm.
So the foundation to me, doing the magic to turn the pain into power, is my wife,
Yeah.
on my children. Like,
Mhm.
that's like the thing for me is, like, I have, like, people put pictures of their dogs, their kids, whatever it is. But for me, it's just like I can visualize them. Quick story. When
Mhm.
I left New York City, we were leaving in the middle of the pandemic. And one of the requirements for my job at the time was I had to report to duty once a week because everyone was working from home except for leadership. The only trouble with that is that I took my family to Michigan to get them out of the city. So I was driving
Wow.
back, Stewart, every week from
No.
Michigan to New York City, going to
Wow.
work leaving at 5 a.m. in the morning, getting there that afternoon for my shift, finishing my shift, going to stay at our apartment, getting back on the road the next morning, spending the week in Michigan. I probably did that. I honestly lost count, but I'm gonna say at least a month and a half, maybe 6, 7 weeks. I did that every week. And you know what kept me going? I would visualize my kids at their graduations. I would see my daughter, who at the time was 2. I would see her at 17, 18 years old. I would just visualize her with long hair, with a gown, giving a speech. I'd see my son. He was like buff. He had a short haircut. He kind of had like this whole Vin Diesel vibe happening. That's just what got me through those trips, because you can imagine this is also at the height of the George Floyd killing,
Mm, mhm.
right?
Yeah.
There were times when I was in the city where they were doing like, there was like helicopters flying over our building, and they were like, they're locking down a city. Everybody needs to be in the house by 11 o'clock. It felt like I was in a daggone Armageddon, end of the world, Civil War type movie. It was wild.
Yeah.
So that's what those, even that kind of trauma, I couldn't even identify that it was trauma until I got away from it and got to really sit with it. But to me, it's really just fuel to know that, like, I made it through that and I'm here better off on the other side. Like it's just got to be a part of, my story.
Yeah. Yeah, no, absolutely, and something that I have always been fascinated by is exactly as you said, oftentimes the low points in our life, we often don't realize how low they are because we're just so focused on getting through it. We're in that fight or flight or freeze, mentality, just trying to get through it. And then it's often in the aftermath that we actually do the work to heal, to even just make sense of what it was that we just experienced. And I acknowledge you for doing a drive like that just to keep everything going for you and the family. That's a testament to your character and you as a father. And for anybody listening to this, I hope you're not putting thousands of miles on your car like Robin was, but I also know that anybody listening to this would pull through for their children as well. And so just a major tip of the cap to you for going through that. And I wanna just hear, like, what was the biggest lesson you learned from that period of your life?
There's a lot, but I think the first thing that comes to mind is really squeezing as much value out of every moment that I have. So
Yeah,
what I did was I had like a listening routine in the car. I would get in and I would listen to like the news for a while. So I had like a playlist. I would listen to like NPR, up first. I would go through like my playlist of like daily news. It was all new. And then I would have like a little hip hop playlist. At the time, I was heavy into music production. So I had just produced a record for an artist named Dayton. And Dayton is kind of big in the Christian hip hop community. And he had
yeah,
two very well-known Christian artists, 1K Few and Wande on the record, which was a big deal in the Christian hip hop community. So then I would like listen to Christian hip hop music for a couple of minutes, and then I would get into the learning. And that's where I really like, when I tell you, I would do full on like I would go to full on conferences. I would do like a whole virtual conference, like a 9-hour conference. I would just be in there room after room after room, listening. I would have my phone there. So I think the biggest thing that I learned is that even though you have to spend 26 hours total on the road to get to work, right? Not even working. Like my commute to work was longer than my time at work.
mm,
However, man, I squeezed the hell out of that time. And I got so much value, made so many connections, learned so much. So I think that's the biggest lesson. Don't look at downtime as downtime. Look at it as your time. So there were segments of that where I was on the phone, Stuart, just catching up with friends that I hadn't
yeah,
talked to for the longest. There were times where I would just build out a block just to have silence and be in my thoughts. You know, it was so calculated, Stu, when I tell you I would arrive at the same time every week at the same gas stations. I would go to the same stalls at the bathroom. I would get the same snacks. And it was just like I knew what how much time I had, and I just squeezed as much value out of every minute.
yeah, yeah, and it's amazing how you can compound the learning, the lessons, the messaging that you're getting from the music or anything that you're listening to, and in terms of the routine that you created for yourself in such an unbelievable situation, how has that transferred forward into your life and career now to set you up for success?
It's a little harder to stay as committed to that type of structure when I don't have two hands on the wheel.
Fair.
So having two hands on the wheel, I kind of have to like, I'm limited in terms of distractions, right? I can't scroll on my phone. I can't. There's just a lot of limitations in terms of being able to just stay locked in or fight off distractions, whatever it may be. But what I would say is that idea of really being intentional about time, like I do something called a joy audit, right? People call it different things, but
Ooh.
really it's like going through and looking at my whole schedule, 24 hours, including sleep, including coffee time, including exercise, whatever the things are, my commute time, and really adding up where I'm putting the extra time. And I think that exercise of driving to New York City every week for 26 hours round trip made me have a newfound respect for time. And the joy audit was conceived after that experience. So I think that was the biggest takeaway is like, hey, you only have so many hours in a day, so many minutes, so many seconds. What's important to you? And where do you want to put your time? I have to go to work because I'm an employee for a company or organization, I should say.
Sure.
I have to get in a car and drive to work, right? Though, unless you work remote, whatever, right? But at the time, right now, at this time, I have to. So for me, right now in this season of preparing for my TEDx talk, that's my rehearsal time. Like I'm in my car, like running my notes, listening to my speech. When it's not TEDx season, for me, for example, one of the shows that I work on is a fantasy basketball show. So I'm doing research while I'm on my way to work. So by the time I get to lunch break, I have 2 or 3 stories that I can maybe during lunch break do a few pieces of content on. So that's
Mhm.
kind of the biggest takeaway from that Michigan and New York experience is really just looking at life as blocks of time and making sure you're prioritizing the things that bring you joy and the things that are important to you.
Yeah, and just to double down because I love this idea of the joy audit because it sounds like something really simple that anybody can do and also super valuable. Is it just as simple as you said, looking at your schedule for the day, where you're assigning your energy and just choosing what you want to go in more on? Tell me a bit more. Please correct me where I'm missing.
No, no, all good. I love that you asked me this because this is something that I don't talk about enough, but it had a huge impact on my life. Let me just quickly take you to how it really started. So, at the time in summer of 2021, I was working for a school. It was like my first job back after being off work for like a year, just at home with my daughter, spending time with her, which was great for me. This is after my Y career. So I went from this like really big job, like one of the biggest YMCA branches in the country, $23 million budget, second in command, about to be the new executive director, getting coached to take on that role, Stu. So I'm like mentally like I'm an association guy. I'm ready to, fight for the
Yeah, yeah,
Y.
yeah.
Pandemic hits and everything had to reset. So during that time, I started building my business. And at the time, my business was built on coaching musicians on how to manage social media. So I built a profitable company. It was making money. I was like, wow, I can make money from this. This is crazy. So I was taking care of my daughter, doing that. And then my brother passed away in
Mm,
2021. So when
I'm
he
sorry.
passed away, thank you, it made me think about what I was doing with my time because he has 2 children. So he left behind 2 young daughters. They lost their dad. And
Yeah,
the pain of losing my brother was rough and is rough to this day. I'm still fighting through it. But to think about my kids not having me breaks my heart.
yeah,
And at that moment, I remember doing like calls with some of these artists, whatever. It just felt like it was icky to me. I was like, this was fun at first because I was making money, but right now, I don't want to do this anymore. So I talked to my mentor. His name is Bill Clan. He's like a brilliant man, retired school principal, and also building manager in New York City of one of the biggest school complexes in the east on the east side of Manhattan. And he's been my mentor for a number of years. And I called him and I said, "Yo, I'm thinking about." I told him exactly. I'm thinking about closing the faucets on my revenue and starting something new. at the time, right before my brother passed away, to get him through while he was in the hospital, we talked about him starting a gaming channel. And I was like, this dude is like on his deathbed. Like he's on his deathbed talking, and we're talking about like ideal audience, like who's your target audience, what's going to be your unique value proposition. Like I'm talking about all the marketing things with him, helping him to build this thing up. I made a logo for him, K-Dub Gaming, like what's his
Mhm.
angle going to be? And it was so inspiring to me that this gentleman was on his essentially his what was his deathbed, and he was like thinking about his dreams. So I secretly went and started a fantasy basketball channel. I never told him, right? I just did. I was like, well, if he can do gaming, I can do that too. And when I told Bill that I was thinking about closing the faucets on this money machine that I had to do something else because it wasn't making me happy, he said, why don't you think about where you want to spend your time and make the decision? But if it's not making you happy, you shouldn't do it. So I pulled out a piece of paper, Stuart, and I wrote down every hour of the day from 12
Mhm.
to 12, 24 hours. I blocked off a certain amount of time for sleep. I put about 6 hours, which is being generous because sometimes I'm living off of 4. But I put 6 hours of sleep.
Right.
Then I talked about what my mornings look like. And then outside of commute, work, and sleep, there's a whole other set of time. And I
Yes.
found that a lot of that time was spent with me tinkering around with this money machine that it wasn't making millions of dollars. It was making tens of thousands of dollars, but it wasn't enough for me to spend so much time on those blocks that they outweighed the blocks that I was spending with my kids. They
Wow.
out
Yes.
they outweighed the blocks that I was spending with my wife, the date
Yeah.
nights,
Mhm.
and right then I was like, I have to do something else. And from there, I've done the exercise. I try to do it like every few months. It's not a one-time deal because things change. We're in, like right now, I'm in a season where my wife and my kids understand that I have a big task at hand preparing for a TEDx talk. So they offer me grace there. But ultimately, it's an exercise that'll help you on paper see the things that matter to you and figure out if there are things that don't matter that you've allowed to creep into your time slots.
Wow. This is actually something I'm going to do as soon as we are off of this conversation because I think we get so stuck as people in this society punching the clock, doing the things that we feel like we're supposed to do, that society tells us we're supposed to do, that social media tells us we're supposed to do to attain the things that sometimes we don't even actually want. We just think we want them because we're told we do. But if it's coming at the cost of your joy and also your family, then what's the point? And so I really love that you shared this today because I know the listeners are going to get a lot out of it. And folks, you don't even have to like go buy a journal or anything. You can just get a piece of paper. You can even just like talk into any type of voice recorder app you have on your phone and just make those notes for yourself. It's really awesome. And I can't wait to do it for myself. So thank you, Robin, for sharing.
Hey, my pleasure, Stu. And one more thing to add before we
Mhm.
move on from that. After I did the Joy audit and after I shut down this money machine that I had, my fantasy basketball channel started off very slow.
Mhm.
I just made it for the love. But since then, it's grown. And because I believe that joy is in my life, I attracted business. So my company now makes 3 times more. Last year, it made 3 times more than it made the year that I shut it down. So although
Wow.
I did take a pay cut up front on the back end, like I believe in God. Like God just blessed me to know that hey, this is a hard decision to make, but I knew that I had to make the decision, and it wasn't just about me. It was about also the fact that there were other people who were watching the content because I was very upfront about why I started the channel. And like I always say it when I'm doing my show, sometimes I feel like my brother's here with me. And when I'm like making
Yeah.
jokes or like I say, I say one thing like, I don't give a shit, Sue Puppy, right? That's my brother, Like, that's my brother talking. So that's another thing about it, is that I know there are people out there who have suffered loss, and this channel that I built, and over the years, and also just the community around it. We have a Discord community, email list, social media platforms, and it's just all rooted in love and joy.
Yeah. And folks, we're going to make sure Robin has the opportunity to plug all the possible ways you can get in contact with him as we near the end of this show. Robin, I want to switch gears here a little bit because it is really important to me that we do really dive in on the TED Talk you're giving. You've said it several times in this conversation. You're a man of faith. Do you feel like it's possible to really recover and heal from loss without some type of faith ritual or belief system in place?
It's a really good question. I do. I think people have, I guess, different experiences with loss. So people mourn differently, people grieve differently. It looks and feels different. Like my mom, when she grieves, she cooks, she laughs, and she cries silently and privately. I think that there are people out there who don't, have faith in their life, and there's a possibility that they will be able to manage their grief. I know for me that there is no way that I would have been able to really pull myself, off of the floor. I always describe it, especially with my brother passing, because of the nature of our relationship.
Mhm.
We were very close, and I compare it to like having my insides removed. I felt I remember walking
Yeah.
through the school I was working at the time. I took a couple of days off, and I came back, and I literally felt like my body was light, and like I was missing, like I could physically feel it. So I know that
Yeah.
there's like different levels of grieving. And for me, I think that having God in your life can definitely make the process a little more manageable. At least for me, I know that I could not have gotten to a better place, without God in my life. But I think some folks, I trust that they have their ways to grieve.
Yeah. Absolutely. And folks, if you're listening to this, this isn't, a giant billboard for us saying you need religion, you need God, but just from somebody who went himself through a lot of life without believing in any type of higher power, I really didn't understand what I was missing
Mm,
until I honestly in my case found Jesus Christ. But having somebody there that has my back in the most difficult of times has made a world of difference, especially in the last several years, leaving the pandemic, which was incredibly stressful for all of us,
mhm.
and so, Robin, I want to ask, the TED Talk again is called How to Live Life with Your Last Words. I just want to outright say it. Is this the last words to your brother, or tell us a little bit more about that?
Yep. So really the talk is action based.
Mhm.
When we talk about our last words, we're not talking about just the last words that we share at the end of life. We're talking about the last words that we use in every interaction that we have on a day-to-day basis. So, for example, my son, you know, he's 14, so it's a tough road for parents of teens, right? But I would say that this practice of being super intentional about the way you conclude an interaction is
Mm,
powerful. And it's something that we don't think about. We kind of move through life and it's like, okay, yeah, all right, Stuart, I'll meet you at 3. Talk to you later, bud. Bye. And that's it.
yep.
Right.
Yep.
Right? It's like it's the way it is. And for me, the idea, like TEDx is all about ideas worth spreading. TED is all about ideas worth spreading. So for me, it's not so much, hey, here are these stories and this is my words for my brother. It's not that. It's hey, these stories, the story about my brother, the story about my mother, I lost both of them and left words on the table with both of them, were examples of what not to do, right? And then on the back end of the talk, I give actionable steps on how you can actually do it. I can't share the steps here, but I will give you the ultimate message. It's about being intentional when you're in a conversation. And when you end it, make sure you end on the note that you want to leave the person with. And try to make it nice. Try to make it
Mhm.
kind. Try to make it filled with love. Like people leave conversations to hurt others. That's what I
Yeah.
did. With my mother, I never got to say goodbye to her. I never got to say I love you. I never got to hug her again. And I'm a mama's boy, Stu. Like I hugged up with my mom in the bed until I was like 15 years old. Like, I love you, mommy. Right? When I go out with my boys, what up, y'all? Chill. Yeah, yeah. I see you on the
Yeah.
block, my guy, all day, all day. Love you, mommy. Right? That was me. And then because of a disagreement, we ended on bad terms. My like mission with this talk is to make sure that no one goes through that experience. If you can avoid it, please do your best to avoid it, because it's something that me now in my 40s, I'm still trying to like let go of this. It's that heavy. So it goes beyond just your loved ones. If you really get skilled with it, it's something that you can bring to your workplace. It's something that you can bring to your churches. It's something that you can bring to Walmart when you're going through the aisle. Mine is easy. I just tell people, have a blessed day. If it's a
Yeah.
stranger, I'm not going to be like, I'm not going to stop the stranger and be like, hey, listen, these 2 minutes that I've known you have been wildly impactful for me. And I just want to let you know that you are going to change the world one day. They'll probably call the cops on me, Stu, right? Right.
Yeah.
So for me, you also want to be mindful of the level of the relationship. So for me, if I have a stranger, my go-to is like, have a blessed day. If we build a little more rapport, like with a coworker, hey, keep being great. So if God forbid something happens to me, your last word with your last interaction with the person carries more weight once you leave. So it's this speech is not about, this talk is not about death. It's not about being morbid. It's about being intentional while we're here. So to create gravity around it, I have to bring you down to bring you up.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
I've never shared those stories. And the
Yeah.
reasons I haven't shared them is because they're painful for me. And I believe sharing them with the world will help me, but also in turn help someone else.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm eating up everything you're saying because the great Maya Angelou always said people might not always remember what you say, but they will always remember how you made them feel. And what better way to start than actually with what we say,
Mm-hmm.
and I wish we had so much more time than we do, but like I definitely relate to a lot of what you're saying. I actually lost my last grandparent, my grandmother, to
Sorry.
COVID. Oh, thank you. And it was a situation where she had had dementia for a while and really was not easy to spend time with, quite frankly, towards the end of her life, just because she couldn't really maintain a conversation. She was also really hard of hearing, couldn't hear. So it took a lot of effort and energy. However, I feel incredibly blessed that I got to see her on one of her last really lucid days. And she couldn't hear a word we were saying. We were literally writing little notes and passing them to her across the table in her assisted living facility. But I just am so grateful to God that I had that opportunity, even though, we didn't really talk about anything substantial. We talked about Steph Curry of all things. But I got to say goodbye and I got to leave knowing, or at least to the best of my ability, wanting to believe that she knows that I love her and I still miss her. And we don't always get those opportunities, but we definitely don't get those opportunities if we're not intentional about them. And I'm hearing you say that's what this talk is about.
Absolutely. I'm sorry about your grandmother, and I'm so happy that you had that experience with her. Yeah, I think that is huge for me to just get on this pod and you share that story because honestly, you're living the idea that I'm trying to share with people because that's something you'll carry with you as long as you live, and I think
Yeah.
that's really what it's about. You know, people go through life and it's so hustle and bustle. We talked about in the green room before we started, we talked about the pace of New York City and living there
Hmm.
for so many years. I almost became desensitized to the hustle. It was just like the way life was. You get up in the morning at like 5, 6 o'clock, you take kids to school, you get on the train, people are next to you, touching you, like
Yep.
somebody's armpit is over your head, right? Like you're sitting in the chair, somebody's balls are in your face,
Yeah.
like
You see a human tooth on the seat for some reason.
right? And you're desensitized. And then for me at this stage of my life, it's like really the first time in many years that I can really reflect on not just my current situation, but my past and future. And I
Yeah.
think that being intentional with the family I have upstairs they're hiding out upstairs while I do the pod, and also the people I care about, I can do better with it. I think a
Sure.
good example is even us connecting on LinkedIn. I think in my message to you, I said something like, "Man, I've always enjoyed working with you. It's really good to connect with you again." So I complimented you because sincerely, I can remember like when we were like hitting all of those numbers and we were like in a sports environment. I never
Mhm.
knew you were really into basketball until we had a little talk in the green room. So
Yeah.
that's just an example of like, even though like all our connection is not like we're not best friends, we haven't like been to the bar together, we always had a professional respect, right? But
Mhm.
being a little intentional about what you say to a person can lead to a moment like this, and there's no telling how many people will be impacted by this conversation. The ripple effect now. So now the ripple effect is if somebody gets this message, maybe they go and they listen to the talk when it comes out online because podcasts will live on forever, right? It'll be as long as the internet is up and running, people will have access to it and they will share it. And then maybe somebody will tell their grandmom that they love her,
Yeah.
and like that's what it's about. So for me, I'm grateful for you and the opportunity. And I think that it's a really poetic example of what the idea is.
Yeah. And folks, what Robin is talking about is applicable to absolutely everyone here. I mean, if you are in a leadership position or aspire to be in a leadership position, people want to follow people that they respect and admire. And oftentimes it's just as simple as making sure that they feel seen, heard, and cared about in their work environment or in the place where you're volunteering or even just in your home. Like, people will follow somebody when it's coming from a place of fear, but it's not because they want to. And you're definitely not going to create any type of meaningful relationship beyond. So I would actually double down on what Robin's saying and challenge you to
Mm,
look at the relationships that you currently have. And similar to the joy audit, just do a quick audit of how are you actually showing up. How can you make sure you're leaving things in those periods of rest in between those interactions? And how can that move the needle, not only in your relationships, but in your life as you
mhm.
continue to develop these deeper connections with folks?
I love that, Stu. And I think for the leaders out there, especially if you lead teams and you have employees or you manage, teams, like I have tons of experience in leadership, right? And I didn't do this during that time. And I wish that I did it. I'm doing a better job of it now in my professional life, but I'm not in the same on the same level of leadership that I was back in my New York days, which is okay because now I'll just continue to carry the practice with me as I move through my professional journey, my family journey. I'm trying to be a better friend. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. Like I got friends, me and my friends are big time Wu-Tang fans. And one thing that we're gonna do to be intentional is try to get on calls at least once a month. We're gonna record the calls and treat them like a podcast. So
I
like
love
that
that.
was another thing. It's like, it's different if we're like, hey, let's just get on a call every week. Now it's like, yo, we got to do a podcast every week. And like that I'm really grateful for them. My big shout out to my brother Ricky, my guy Ricky. It was his idea. So yeah, and he just lost his dad. So rest in peace to his pops.
Mhm.
Ricky had a tough year, so this is a part of his healing journey, and just being there for friends has been a really, really good opportunity for me.
Yeah, absolutely. If there's any chance you guys are all from Brooklyn, you should call it the Brooklyn Zoo.
Ah, that's good. We're not all for Brooklyn. Nah, but that's a good name. Hey, that's a good name.
I digress. I digress. Robin, I want to just acknowledge you. I maybe just one thing I want to challenge you, the life coach in me. Just wanted
Hmm.
to challenge one thing. You said that you are not in the leadership roles that you used to be. I would argue because of the lessons you've learned and how you've shown up, you are showing up bigger and better and more boldly in the most important leadership position of all, which is as a husband and a father. So I want to acknowledge you for that.
I receive it. I receive it. Because dads we don't get enough props out here. I know Father's Day is coming up.
No, we don't.
So, I'm from dad to dad. I appreciate that. And I receive it because I'm aware of it. And I think my professional journey, there was a certain amount of trauma of work from working in New York, right? And coming
Yes.
here. And then also for me, there was like this whole pride thing that I was going over. And now where I'm at, I'm like, dude, like we have a house, like my
Mhm,
kids are in a great school zone, and I get to do this
mhm.
so for me, I received that, and I'm really glad that you shared that point with me. I can't forget that.
Yeah, man. Absolutely. Never ever overlook the amazing work that you're doing right there in the home. And that goes for anybody listening to this as well. Robin, we are running out of time. So I want to make sure everybody knows how to continue the conversation with you. Obviously, the TED Talk will come out online sometime in the future. We will be sure to support you in getting that out to our listeners so that they can connect with you. But how can people connect with you on social media?
Yep. I really have two profiles for both brands, my personal brand as well as my podcast. So my personal brand is at Robin Marks. That's ROBBINMARX. So that's two B's, Robin Marks. And that's across all social media platforms. And then you can also get me at Believe in Fantasy, which is my sports podcast that I talked about on the show a little earlier on. And that's spelled BLEAV in fantasy. And that's where I do all of my NBA content and stuff like that. So yeah, folks can reach out to me. And then the last thing, Stu, I have for your audience, by day, I'm a social media professional, and also the services that I provide with my business are social media services. So I do a newsletter every week where I give tons of resources and free nuggets. So if folks want to sign up for that, they can hit up bit.ly/Peachtree Social. That's bit.ly/Peachtree Social.
Awesome. Awesome. And absolutely, folks, we will have all of these links available in the comments, in the show notes, wherever you are catching this episode. And I absolutely encourage you to continue this conversation with Robin offline. And Robin, I want to just acknowledge you for the light that you are in this world, the leader that you are, and really just tackling a subject matter that gets really overlooked, like severely overlooked in our society. And being someone that decided that it is an idea worth sharing. And so I can't wait to catch your TED Talk once it's posted, and we'll be sure to post it for all of the listeners here. Robin, the last question I ask everybody on the show: what are you acknowledging yourself for today?
Hmm. Today, I would like to acknowledge myself as being a rad dad, a huggy hubby, and also a real friend. And to you, Stu, I just want to let you know that you are a friend. If you ever need anything, whether it's me pulling up on a show or getting more guests, on the show, anything I can do to support you, I just want to let you know that I'm here for you, bro. And I'm super grateful for this opportunity.
Well, right back at you, sir. You know, God doesn't make mistakes. He reconnected us at this time for a reason, and I'm sure we're gonna figure out what that is. But folks, thank you for listening. If you have this far, and if you have, I know you got some value out of this. So please be sure to share this with somebody you know that can stand to benefit as well. Again, the cost of admission here is free, but we do ask that you do your part in helping us reach as many people as possible so folks like Robin can have their voices heard. And last but not least, please be sure to hit that little bell icon. We are going to be going up to 2 episodes per week here fairly soon. We want to make sure you don't miss any of the content that is coming your way. Folks, this has, as always, been your inside track to success. I'm your host, Stuart Cranes. We will catch you next week. See you soon.